What's going on? This is Ryan with Automatic Comics, and I think I've got an important video here about why you always need to check your books. Alright, so before we get started, please remember to hit that like button and hit the subscribe button if you'd like to see more content like this. So, I've talked about this in basically every video where I am unboxing raw comics. I always say it, I say I'm gonna check that book either after the video, I'm gonna flip through the pages, I'm gonna do page counts, I'm gonna look for restoration, color touch, trimming, all that kind of stuff, because it's important. And it doesn't matter who you're buying from. It can be the biggest dealers out there or just, a small individual seller. You've got to check your books. It's not necessarily that somebody has some nefarious, plot where they're trying to sell you, restored books or that kind of thing. It can be just people are in a rush, people miss things. It could be that somebody is trying to get something by you. That definitely is a thing that happens out there. That's why a lot of books out there are trimmed. It's somebody who's trying to pass off a book as something that was better than what it was. And so what I'm going to talk about are a few different things that you can look for because of an example that I just had happen. So if you've watched my recent unboxings, this was one of the books that I opened up. This is a book that I purchased from Heritage. And yes, it was sold as in poor condition, but unrestored. And it was missing 2 interior wraps. But when I opened it up, I immediately thought something was wrong. I could tell from the cover that I thought something didn't look right. And then I took a closer look after the video and confirmed that. And so I was going to talk about that as well as some other types of restoration. Now, I did reach out to Heritage. I wanted to keep the book, but I didn't want to keep it for what I paid for it. I paid for it as an unrestored copy. And so, unfortunately, they basically said, well, since it was sold in poor condition, you can either keep the book as is or you can return it for a refund. So I'm going to be returning it for a refund. I don't really like that response personally because I feel like it kind of sets a precedent that they're saying, oh, well, we said it was poor. That means that there could be restoration even if we didn't report it. And because poor condition, restoration or not, restoration still impacts the value of that book. And you're potentially expecting somebody that doesn't have a ton of experience with these necessarily to identify that for themselves. And then they're just going to be, disappointed or shocked when they send it into CGC, it gets the purple label. I'm a big fan of Heritage. I buy a lot from Heritage. You guys see me open stuff from Heritage all the time. They're going to give me a refund on the book, but I wasn't real pleased with how that was phrased because to me it comes across as, you need to check, and you should anyway, like I said, but you need to check your raw books if you're buying them from Heritage because they may not be reporting restoration. So I've had this happen with a number of books, and this is why I'm talking about this. It's been a frustrating year for raw books for me. I had an FF Annual 2 that was missing 8 pages. It was sold to me as complete, 8 pages. I had the Submariner 4 that was missing a centerfold, Marvel Mystery 56 that had glue on the spine, replaced staple, Walt Disney's Comics and Stories missing a page, X-Men 14 missing a page, ASM 3 with color touch, the Boy Comics 7 I showed before that had color touch but I decided to keep, and a Marvel Mystery Comics 20, this one, with tear seals, and definitely here and possibly on the spine as well. And so it's just been, everybody's always good about the returns, but it wears on you a bit, when you're constantly having to be on guard that you're getting books that are restored, because it feels like you're doing the other person's job for them. When they're selling you the book, they should be checking the books. And so I just want to show first the Marvel Mystery Comics. So this is the Marvel Mystery Comics number 20. And so yeah, you can see it looks really nice and everything. The thing that jumped out, and you can see it when you get close, is right here. You see that line there? It's like, hey, that looks like a tear. When I saw that, I was like, that's definitely a tear. That's not like a crease or something. And then when you open the book and you look at the inside cover, you can see right there, it was definitely a tear, but it doesn't separate anymore. It's fully attached. And then one of the things I did was I took a look at, this is one of the great things about Heritage too, is that they keep all of their past sales, everything. And so what I did is I looked up Marvel Mystery Comics 20, and I looked through the past sales. And lo and behold, I found this exact same book that sold 15 years ago, 2007. So I've got a couple pictures I'll throw up here. The first one is at the spine near one of the staples, and so you can see there's like a big tear near the staple that really isn't here anymore. It's right here, and it feels stiff there now. And so I believe that's actually, it's pretty well done restoration. You know, there's basically some tear seals there that corrected that tear that was up here near the spine, and then the next big one, and this is part of the reason how I know it's the same book. Like, you can see it had all this, you know, this writing that was in the M, and that's been cleaned up. It's got that pen there. You know, it's very clearly the exact same book. But then if you look down at the bottom where that tear seal is, you can see it's clearly a tear. There's actually white on the front. The back of the cover where the tear is was on the top, and so you can see that tear was there, whereas now there's nothing. You know, it's like it's perfectly matched. And so at first I was like, was it? I mean, because it's done really well. It's done well. You could probably say it was probably like professionally restored. And that one back then wasn't sold as missing any pages. I don't know if they just didn't report it. It was still sold as in poor condition, or if somebody took this book and then removed some pages to complete another copy. I don't know for sure. But so for that book, you know, that was the thing that was really helpful with that site, is I was able to go back and find this actual listing. I'm like, oh, okay, I know for sure that this book has these tear seals on it. And that's when, you know, I reached out to Heritage, and we worked out the return that I'm going to be doing with this book, because I felt I paid near the top end of what you would pay for an incomplete universal copy. I think I paid, it's around $850 or $870 or something like that. And I'd be hard. It's hard to say, like, an unrestored incomplete copy, like $1,000 maybe max value for this book. But once you've got restoration on it, it's going to hurt the value. And so, you know, we'll see. I don't know if they'll end up listing it again and then report the tear seals or what. But so that's one of the books. So I thought that was important to show, because you can see, like, that's how you can identify things like tear seals. It looks like, you know, on this one, it looks like you have that tear there, and you can see it here, you can see it on the back cover, but the book doesn't separate. It's stuck together. And so that's kind of like a tear seal thing. They'll often be on the spine. That's very likely where you'll see them, is tear seals are on the spine, where it'll look like there's a tear, but the book doesn't split anymore. Now, another one that I had, because I've had people ask, you know, how do you identify things like color touch, that kind of thing. The black light doesn't always work. Black light actually doesn't work very often, you know, for color touch. There's not a lot of the inks that actually fluoresce with the black light. And so a lot of times, most of the time, it's amateur. And so you'll see what I call bleed through, or what most people call bleed through, on the back side of the cover. And so it's usually where you see something where there's a crease, but you don't see a color break on that cover. You expect there to be a color break, but you don't see it. And then if you look on the back side of the cover, you'll see some ink bleed through where that crease is. And so the place where I had that happen was the Amazing Spider-Man 3, and I've got a couple pictures of that one. And so I'll throw up one picture where it's the front cover. And so this is one where you can see how somebody could have potentially missed it. They just saw a whole bunch of creases. They're like, oh, they didn't fill in everything. And so there's no color. There's probably no color touch here. But you can see there's one crease in there that is basically filled in with pen. And so what it probably was there was maybe an early crease on the book, and that one got filled in, and then over time the book got more creases, and just those never did. And so it's probably an old restoration. But then you can see on the inside of the cover, you can see the bleed through. You can see that pen that has now bled through to the inside of the cover. And so these are some things that are like the first things I look for when I get a book. I mean, before I even do page counts, really, because you see it so quickly with things like this, where just something doesn't look right, where you have the tear seal, or with color touch, where you expect to see a color break and you don't see one, and then just quickly flipping to the inside of the cover and you see bleed through. It's just guaranteed. You've got color touch there, and if you're fine with it, if you wanna keep it, fine, you can keep it. But otherwise, usually that's something that will necessitate a return. Now, one of the other ones that I had that I just did the unboxing for was this one. But this one I knew there was trimming, and I talked about trimming with that, where the right edge here was trimmed and then the top edge was trimmed. And now what I talked about there for the top edge, and I realized after I watched the videos maybe I wasn't clear, depending on how familiar you are with comics and everything. As I said, there was no overhang on the top edge. And so what I mean by overhang is I had this other book that I did pick up that is not restored. And so you can see on the top edge there, you see that little bit of like fold there on the cover. Basically, the front cover will be a little bit larger on the top side, longer on the top side than the pages. And so you have extra cover above the pages. That's the overhang. And in a real high grade copy, you're not gonna have that fold, but this just makes it shows it really easily, where you've got that fold there. And so if you have that overhang, it is very unlikely that it's been trimmed. So the reason someone might trim it is because of wear like this, and they think, oh, I'll trim that top edge, then it'll look real clean, and then I won't have, won't get downgraded for that, the color breaks that are on that overhang. And so with this book here, you can see there's absolutely no overhang there. It's just straight across. You can see the pages. Let's see if we can get it's doing a pretty good job focusing. You can see the pages, if I hide behind it a little bit, and then the cover. And so there's no overhang, it's just a straight shot there. And so that's what I was talking about with that. Now, with the right edge trim, when I was talking about that peak, I figured I could show it with this book. So this one out, and try to see if I can get it to show up on camera here. But you can, let's see if I can get it here. So you can see how there's like you can see the edges are, you can see all the different edges of the pages, because this book doesn't have any spine roll or anything. And so they're kind of like flared up there. And at the very top, it's gonna be real hard to get this to focus on this, but there's maybe there we go. There's a little peak at the top there. And so that's what I'm talking about, where if you had a bunch of paper and you fold them all together and they're all the same size, the ones that are in the middle are going to be higher up than the ones that are on the outside. And so you're going to end up with that little peak, and it's not always necessarily like the whole length of it. You will see it though for some section of the book. And if you have that little peak there, it is very unlikely that the book has been trimmed. It's still possible they could have just trimmed the front cover, the cover itself, and not the actual pages. Then you might see a bunch of exposed, pages or something. But there's still there. That's why it gets so tricky with trimming, because there are cases where you have a book that's not trimmed that will have more, of an exposed page. It was just a shorter cut cover, that kind of thing. But if we look at this book here, again, you can see, and it's really helpful that it's in this clear backing board. You can see that there's no peak with this. It's all just flush with the pages. And one thing I've noticed where I've had trim books or seen trim books, a lot of times you see all this little tiny damage. And it's not 100% of the time. It's just something that's often there. You see all this, like these little bits of tiny damage along there. That is often a sign that the book was trimmed. That I will very often see that when a book has been trimmed, that it'll have all this little bit of damage. It's like from the cutting, it just over time shows up as this little bit of damage along the spine. But yeah, so that's why this book, it's pretty obvious that it's been trimmed. It doesn't have any of that, the flaring of the pages. But it's a pretty small amount of trim. That's why one of the things that you'll see is that you can't just measure a book. Because look at this. So this book, it's the same width as the Fantastic Four 52. The 52 hasn't been trimmed. the 51, or the number 1 has been trimmed. They are the exact same width. And so that's why it's not necessarily as simple. I've heard some people say like, oh, I measured it, I know it's trimmed. That's not the case. There's too much variability, especially in like the silver, bronze, golden age between books, that you can't just simply measure something and say, okay, this is too small or whatever, and that means that this has been trimmed. Now this one on the height side, it's the same is true. You can see, let's see if I can line it up right. On this one, it's a little bit, maybe a little bit shorter, but not much. You know, it was a pretty small amount of trimming regardless. But like I said, you can't just measure them. I've watched some videos with ETA Nick where he's shown multiple books next to each other, none of them having been trimmed, and you have 1/4 inch differences in the height of those books potentially. And so you can have some pretty big variation, and that's why measuring itself is not a perfect method for doing that, and I wouldn't really recommend it. I think you're going to have false positives a lot of the time. And then one of the other types of restoration, and this is one where you can really use that black light to find this, was glue on the spine. And so I've got some pictures of the book that I had that with. Which one was it? It was the Marvel Mystery 56. I think that's the one it was. And so that one, when I got the book, you know, it looked like there was some type of substance on the spine, and then I hit it with the black light, and it just lit up. And so you can see, you know, pictures of that up here. That's what you would expect to see if you have the black light and you've got glue there. It will light up very quickly, very bright, and it really does show that you've got that type of restoration on there. That one, you know, it's nice that one pops up very easily. That one's quick to see. But, you know, one thing, I did check this one with the black light, and even though there's definitely some type of glue or some type of substance that was holding it together, it did not light up. So that's why I said this one was done very well. You know, this was probably professional in what was done there. And so it's a really small amount, maybe only on the pages, and so it wasn't sticking out on the sides where you would get it to light up. But yeah, so that's one of the other types of restoration that you might see on there. The black light is really the best way to see it. But I hope you found this video useful. You know, it's just, like I said, every time you're buying raw books, you need to check them. Doesn't matter who is selling it, because people miss things, and it's your responsibility then as the buyer to make sure that you catch that. And so the more knowledge you have, the more likely you are to be able to catch those mistakes, those misses, and that you aren't surprised when you then, if you send the book in to get graded, that you're going to get that purple label. Now, it can still happen. You know, everybody can miss things, and so that's why I'm pretty forgiving generally about it. I know it happens, but it does get frustrating, especially when you've got books that are, you know, it's like this, like almost $1,000. A lot of those books that I listed were $1,000 or more, and you know, you have high expectations when somebody is selling a book that's that expensive, that they're doing their due diligence and checking them. And so just something that, just be aware, it does happen. You know, like I buy a lot of books, so maybe it's more likely to happen to me than maybe somebody else. But that was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different books in probably the last 3 or 4 months, something like that. You know, that's more than I would really like to experience in that short of a period of time. But that's just one of those things where you've really got to check your books and make sure that everything is what you paid for, because it's your money that you're spending on them, and you want to make sure you're getting, you know, what's advertised. So hope you enjoyed this video, maybe learned something useful with identifying different types of restoration. If you did, please hit that like button, hit the subscribe button if you'd like to see more content like this. I've got more videos over here if you'd like to watch some of my other videos, and the subscription button right here. If you'd like to subscribe to the channel, I'd really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next video.